Hi folks, it's Karen Gilbert here from the Artisan Perfumery Mastermind, and today I wanted to introduce you to an alumni of the Mastermind, Earl Williams, and he has very kindly agreed to have an interview with me and share his story and his journey in perfumery. And he joined the Mastermind back in March 2020, and at the time he was selling fragrances in his own business, but he was buying in fragrance oils, diluting them and repackaging them and selling them to customers. And he struggled with, in the beginning, the confidence to really feel like he could create his own. And I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but let's say that we all encouraged him over his time in the program to transition out of buying in ready-made fragrances and actually start creating his own to sell to his customers. And his story is very, very inspiring, and I hope that it will inspire you too, to really believe that it is possible to learn something like this and create fragrances that customers love in a relatively short space of time, and have the confidence to do so moreover. So without further ado, let's chat to Earl. Okay, so welcome, Earl. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story. I think it's going to be so inspiring for everybody watching. Those people who have not joined the Artisan Mastermind, or people who are beginners, and even I know that even sharing your story to a lot of the people inside the Mastermind, they've seen you post on, when you've joined all the lives, and I think you're one of the people. There are a few people who show up every single time and take action. And you're one of those people. So I think it's going to inspire everybody who's even going through the program to actually kind of, have a bit more confidence that they can do it. So what I'd like to do first is just hand it over to you a little bit. And what I'd like is if you could just introduce yourself, your business, and where people can find you online, first of all, and then we'll head into some questions.
All right. Well, my name is Earl Samuel Williams, and my website is earlsamuelwilliams.com. The name of the business is E.S.W. Perfume Bar. And what I do is I run a perfume bar where I allow customers and visitors to my booth to come and create their own signature scent. Now, they can do this in 3 easy steps. They can choose a base that they like, a few accessory notes up to 3, and then I'll blend it for them right on the spot.
I love that. And actually, we'll get into this a little bit more, but you didn't really start out like that, did you?
No,
it's been a journey. It's been a journey.
That was the evolution.
Yeah. So, so where were you? So let me just ask you this first of all. And obviously, I know your story, but the people out there don't. So actually, let me just dial it back a little bit. So when you first realized, actually, maybe this is something that we can transition to as we go along, but when you first realized you wanted to make perfume or start a fragrance business, my question was, what were the difficulties or challenges that you were having that made you seek out a perfumery teacher? But I think it might have been a little bit different for you, right? Because when, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you joined the Mastermind, did you think, oh, I want to make perfume one day, or was it for another reason? So can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I'm not really sure what your initial reason was for joining and seeking out a teacher as such.
Well, I was running into something consistently. I was already buying fragrances pre-made, bottling and packaging them and reselling them in different shopping centers. So there's a ceiling to that. There's only so much you can do, so far you can go with that. And what I was looking for in seeking perfumery was I was looking for customization options. And I wanted to make sure that I knew, I'm a stiff for knowing what I'm doing. So I wanted to make sure that I had some proper instruction and that I wasn't just going out into the marketplace, just going by the but going by my seat.
Yeah, so you would so you weren't just blending stuff together that you really weren't sure what what was going on. But yeah, so that was the challenge that you had. And so before you joined the mastermind, were you doing anything else to learn about perfumery? Or
Everything that I learned beforehand was all by osmosis. I worked for a fragrance shop about 8 years ago.
yeah,
And in that fragrance shop, we had different types of designer type fragrances and Eastern fragrances as well too. So that kind of introduced me to fragrance in general, because I didn't wear much cologne or perfume before then. So having that exposure to it kind of piqued my interest because I was working with it every day. We also took those fragrances and we made different products with it on the spot. So we made things like body butters where we would take the fragrance and we would add it to it. And we would do all of this really bar style, like right on the spot as the person
yes,
would choose their fragrance. And then we would put into different bases. So that's
yeah.
how I got interested in it.
Yeah, so I think that's something that a lot of people out there are going to be familiar with, because it's kind of like buying a fragrance oil off the shelf and then putting it into a product, right? So I think a lot of people, when they start out, they do that with body butters, they do that with candles, reed diffusers, buying pre-made stuff off the shelf. Now, the difficulty with that, and this is something that, I talk about this all the time in the mastermind, but for those of you who are watching who don't, the problem with that is that fragrance oils generally are designed to be, you take one fragrance oil and you put it in a product. You don't take 10 fragrance oils, blend them together and put it in a product, because the safety regulations that each oil has when it's brought to market doesn't apply to you mixing and matching them. And that can cause all kinds of trouble. The other reason that I don't recommend fragrance oils is, I think they have their place, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with them if you're using them as they're intended, but people tend not to, right? They tend to want to dabble them together. And so the danger in using them to formulate perfumes is that you buy a rose fragrance oil from one company, you buy a rose fragrance oil from another company, they could be completely different. And so if your supply dries up in one side, then you have to replace it. Then that's a whole formulation nightmare. So that's just a little bit of a sidestep. So that's what you were doing originally. And I remember, so how long, first of all, I want to ask you, when did you first discover the Artisan Perfumery Mastermind, and actually me as a teacher, and what drew you to the mastermind specifically?
I was searching for information on perfumery because this was 2 years ago in 2020, March 2020. We had just started our lockdown. So I had absolutely no idea how long this was going to be at the time, and no one could work. So in that case, I had tons of time on my hands to think about how I wanted, because at some point we had to be able to go back to the marketplace. So I was thinking, well, when I go back, how do I want this to run? Because I had a chance very briefly in January and February to kind of operate that for the first time in where I'm currently living in Dallas, Texas. So I'm operating it and I'm seeing the limitations that I wanted to move past. And I was looking for ways to actually to make it my own. The only way that I knew was how we did it in the shop that I worked at previously.
Yeah.
So this way I was making it my own. It was that kind of journey.
Yeah. And how did you first discover me as a teacher and the mastermind? What did you just find it on Google, or?
That was online. I was researching different perfumery courses, and I only found two. And really I found the one, and they had a YouTube video, and YouTube gives you recommendations. So one of your videos came up in the recommendations, and
That's good
I watched it. It led me right to you. I watched that video.
That's so funny, because I haven't made a YouTube video for literally, like, oh my God, I don't even know how long, a really, really long time. So this is a good tip for all of you folks out there, like head to YouTube, because that stuff, it just lasts, you know. If I haven't
It
made a
does.
video for at least 5 years and people still find me through YouTube. So that was really interesting. So what I wanted to just dig into a little bit is your story, really, in so you joined the program in lockdown, and I do remember it was a bit of a crazy time for all of us, and we all just like leapt online and had a bit of a powwow, because we didn't really know what was happening, and everyone was feeling a little bit kind of shaky and not really knowing what was going to happen. And I really love that you used that time really productively. And I think there was a lot of people really started to dig deep into their, you know, what do I want my life to look like when we come out of this? Because, you know, life's too short to do something, you know, to procrastinate and not do what you love.
Exactly.
And so I do remember that you were like, okay, this is what I want to do. But can we just talk a little bit about how you felt right at the beginning with your confidence bit? Because I know that I get so many messages from people that really don't feel that they can actually do it and put themselves out there, and they don't feel that they can make their own fragrances, and they're not good enough, and, you know, all of the other stuff that comes up. So was there anything that came up for you in that beginning time where you were like, oh, I'm not really sure if I can do this?
It was fine when I was doing the course material and experimenting at home, on my own. I
Yeah.
was absolutely terrified to actually put things that I had created to be judged by people, when we started doing markets and shows again. It was terrifying. And actually, I lied a lot when I first started putting my blends out. I would put them in bottles the same way I would put the other prepackaged ones. And I would never tell them that I made this, but I would have them smell it. And I would let them judge it without anyone knowing, because I also didn't want them to think that, I also didn't want them to try to not hurt my feelings either and tell me any stories. So I was terrified to just say, I created this. I want you to try it. Tell me what you think. I snuck it in the beginning, and I did that for maybe a few months before I actually just started saying, okay, I made this. This is what's in it. This is what it. This is my creation.
Yeah, and I remember you going through that. I think we all felt like we went through that a little bit with you at the time, because there was lots of on the monthly live Q&As. I remember, you know, having conversations with you about that, and oh, I'm not really sure. And I said, like, you know, test it alongside the other stuff and see.
Oh yes.
And so, yeah, and so what happened then? What was that? What was the initial reaction?
I made 9 blends. And those blends I put out, and I started to let people smell them. And it was one that I named Lemon Head, after a candy, because it kind of smelled kind of sweet and kind of citrusy and lemony. And that was one of the first ones that I consistently got positive reviews from. And then I started showing them the other 8. And I kept getting all of these positive reviews, and people were actually using them as building blocks to put their fragrance together. And they used it so much, it kind of dawned on me. It was all in my head. It dawned on me that everything that in my mind, I thought that everyone would be like, this is terrible. You're not a perfumer. Yeah. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be doing this. And it wasn't like that at all. It was it was all me just making myself fearful.
Absolutely. And I think so many people do that as well. And so let's kind of like bring us up to date a little bit. And, you know, so how has that progressed? So what are you working on? What are you doing now? So what did that move into? Because I know that you are now doing pop-up events and things like that.
Yes. So the pop-up events that I'm doing now, I do them frequently. So just about every weekend I'm somewhere doing a pop-up perfume bar. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm having all of the guests at these different places create their own fragrances, but it's also leading to something that it also went into a direction that I hadn't originally intended. So I'm actually running into people who are interested in having me create bespoke fragrances for them.
Which is
And that is a whole new thing, which is exciting and it's fun. And you get to create one-on-one with people. And I'm building a business just off of that, just off of people who meet me in a public setting, move to a private setting to create even more. And I'm also doing private events as well too. So I'm also being invited to people's homes, and I'm being invited to different venues for private parties that people are having to entertain their guests. So it's been a world, it's completely different from what I originally had thought this was going to be. It's better.
That's amazing. And so one of the questions I was going to ask you is like, how is launching, launching your perfumery business, but actually I know you were selling fragrances before, but how has launching your own stuff in your perfumery business, your own fragrances in your perfumery business impacted your life?
It's a huge confidence builder because it's putting out my own fragrance was like public speaking, how people feel about public speaking. It was something that I knew I had to do it because I'd already committed to the course. I had already been participating. So at some point, I have to take this, put it in front of the marketplace, make the proper adjustments if I needed to. And it was something that it was something that had to be taken, something that had to be done.
And so, yeah, and I know that so you've already shared this, and, it's opened a lot more doors for you, right? So you're being in, you're getting a reputation in your local area. Oh, yes. Of the person to go to for people who want a private event perfume.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes. It opened up a ton of opportunities. I meet so many people at this point. I've actually had to, I'm not as, well, I wasn't as good with social media. I didn't post often. I'm posting more frequently now just because I have so many people that I'm meeting. And one of the first things they ask for is the social media handles. So I started posting different things so that people can see things when they go there. I'm meeting people every weekend, and this person does these kind of events, and I get invited to this place, and it's I don't have to hunt for places to go and vend that. People actually invite me and want me to come there. That's a very uplifting feeling too. It's a side benefit. I'm being invited most of the time. I'm not hunting for places to go.
That's amazing, actually. And that is such a good, not lesson, that's the wrong word, but it's like inspiring for other people out there. Because I think today, when I first started my first business, actually, not the one that I'm doing now, this was back in 2003, and we didn't really have Facebook. We didn't have Facebook then. I don't think we didn't have a lot of social media going on. I think it was just about MySpace just launched or something like that. But, we had to go out, and we were a local business, and we had to, go out handing flyers on the street. And it was, it was word of mouth. And honestly, I think word of mouth and people coming, meeting people, like, social media is great for getting you outside, just growing your reach really quickly. And I think a lot of people rely on that solely a bit too much nowadays. And actually, you're proof that word of mouth is so strong, and also it's proof that what you're doing, people are liking and people are wanting to spend money on, right? So yes. It's, the proof is in that.
It really is. I've been raising my prices every few months for every few months just to see, will they
What
pay
the,
this?
yeah, what the
And
tipping
so
point
far,
is.
yes. And so far, people don't flinch.
That's amazing. And that's another good tip for people as well. You know, I think when you're starting out, and you're starting out in bespoke, especially, you know, people are, I think if you're creating fragrances to sell into other retail stores, there are lots of different ways you can create a perfumery business, right? You can
Yes.
have the vision of, right, I'm going to go into this. My goal is to go into this high-end boutique, and I don't want to meet people. I just want to make the fragrance, and then I just want to put them in the store, and I sell them wholesale. So then you have to build in your pricing to that. But actually, when you start out, if you can do it, it's really, really good to just get out there, you know, not have massively high prices at the start. And that will give you more confidence, because, you know, one of the things that a coach said to me, you know, when you're putting something new out into the market, you don't want people to not buy it based on price. You don't want that to be the reason why they say no. And so go in, when you first start, go in at something that's quite accessible. And if people like it, it's because they buy it and they enjoy it, you know, whatever, then they come back. Then, you know, the product is good. And then you can gradually raise the prices until it's at a point where, you know, there's that tipping point. So I think that's great. And that's great that you're raising the prices and not staying in that sort of lower level. That's pretty amazing. And I think that's a tip that everyone can learn from. Sorry. Okay. So you know, are you still selling the ready? Are you still buying in oils, or is it all your own stuff now?
It's all my own now. I I couldn't imagine at this particular point, like having someone else's fragrance. I still have people that ask me about it, so I have to tell them that I don't do it anymore. Like, I don't have that. Everything is customizable. It's interactive in creating your own.
That's amazing. And so, yeah, so from, you know, March, when you started, until now, you finally like transitioned out of buying in, and it's all your own. I didn't actually know that. That's why I asked you. I was like, I wonder if he's still doing, you know, the other stuff on the side. But could you know, how does that feel?
It's super empowering. Being able to create things, not just the blends that I create for myself and put on the perfume bar, but recently, this past Friday, I want to say, I had someone do a private session, and just to be able to sit one-on-one and create with this person, that's one thing that never gets old, is the look on a person's face when they smell something that they like, no, something that they love,
Yeah.
and you put those pieces together with them. And another thing that never gets old is that when a person looks at something that they're smelling, and they look at me and they say, well, what do you think I should put in here? And they take my advice, because now I'm feeling more like, well, I guess I do know what I'm talking about now.
That's amazing. And so what do you know, so with all the challenges you had before you started, what do you think was the biggest kind of like game changer for you? What was the bit where it all clicked into place?
It was going out and it was going and doing something. I felt that I resisted putting things that I created out before.
Yeah.
And even now, like anytime I make something new, every once in a while, I want to make some new blends, and I want to swap out some old ones and test them out. But the nervousness never goes away. It's more, I'm always resisting the fact that I am nervous. And I put it out there anyway. And the nervousness never goes away.
It's the feel the fear. So I would,
Yeah.
so what I'm hearing you say here is actually the bit, you know, you had time to study all the modules. I know that you show up to all the Q&A sessions, and, you know, you ask questions, and like you're helpful to people in the group. But actually the thing that really brought it all together for you was actually doing the work, rolling up your sleeves and making the fragrances and putting it out there.
Yes, yes. And one more thing, as a matter of fact, one thing that I did that worked for me really well was I picked a teacher, obviously you, and I just decided that I'm just going to do things Karen's way until I understand how to do this, because I know nothing. And I know from studying different marketing courses that everyone has some valid information. But if I listen to this person and that person and that person, they know what they're doing. I'm still confused. So I decided with perfumery, like whatever Karen's way is, I'm going to do that. And then when I have a working knowledge, if I want to experiment and add a little bit of this and a little bit of that, I can do it when I understand what's happening. So far, I haven't. I haven't had a need to, but that's what I decided in the beginning. Pick a teacher, stick with that teacher, and get yourself the working knowledge, the fundamentals first. That
Yeah,
helped me
I thank
tremendously.
you for that. Yeah, that I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of, what if the perfumery is, it's like a big topic, right? And it can be really
Yes.
overwhelming. It can be really confusing for people. And I think that if you're listening to, there is, and I say this all the time, it's a bit of a cliche now, that you ask 10 different perfumers how to make perfume, and they'll give you 10 different answers. And so I
Yeah.
think what people often do is they're searching for the correct answer. And so they're looking to this person and that person. And the news is there isn't a correct answer. There is only the way that works for you. So I try to keep my trainings as simple and as clear as possible, so people can go through the steps and do the work. And like you say, once you've got the fundamentals under your belt and you really feel confident, you've created some fragrances that work, you're getting good feedback on them, right? You know what you're doing, great.
Mhm.
Then you can start to experiment, break the rules. And actually, what I say isn't always, it's not the only way. Obviously, there are so many different ways to do things. And what I say my most commonly used phrase is, it depends. Um, there are so many variables. And so, yeah, once you've got the confidence, go out and experiment. You don't have to stick to one way forever. But yeah, I do believe that when you're first starting out, is just go through things step by step and put it into practice. Because I think a lot of people tend to do courses and intellectualize it, but then
Mhm.
and I know that I've had a few emails about that this week, when people have been asking questions, and in this 5-day workshop, that okay, I'm even too scared. I've got all of these materials, but I'm too scared to do anything with them. And they get a little bit paralyzed. And so you saying, actually, the penny drop moment, it all came together for you, was when you actually started blending for yourself, the actual action of putting things together. I think that's really important and really powerful. And so there's only so much you can learn, like theory wise. You've got to put it into practice. And you've certainly
Exactly.
done that. And here we are, it really shows.
Oh yeah. It only took 2 years.
And that's amazing, right? Because traditional perfumery schools say, you've got to train for, you've got to go to have a chemistry degree, then you've got to go to a then you've got to be picked up by one of the major perfume houses, or the schools, and then you've got to train for at least 5 years. Then you're a student perfumer still, or a junior, or whatever. Then you've got to mix stuff in the lab for someone else for X amount of years, and
Yeah.
that's all well and good, but that is a very specific training for the industry, and they work in a very, very specific way. And that's why I call what I teach artisan perfumery, because artisan perfumery is where you, the perfumer, are getting your hands on the materials. You're working with them every day. You're experimenting. And in the perfumery industry, unfortunately, that isn't how it is. It's a lot of stuff is done on a computer, on a spreadsheet, and the formulas are typed up and then sent to the lab, and then really the perfumer is not really hands-on every day with materials. So it's a very, very different process, and it's a whole different industry. So 2 years is amazing. I
Oh, yeah.
really you know, I'm so proud of what you've done.
Thank you.
And yeah, and I'm sure that your story is going to inspire so many people too. So I'm going to close off for today and just thank you so much, Earl, for coming to join me today. And what I will do is I will post your links below the video, and I'm going to post this in the Facebook group of the 5-day signature scent workshop, and just send people to watch it, because I think it's going to be so inspiring.
Nice. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for joining the group as well. I'm sure lots of people will be curious and want to chat in the group. So that's it for today, and thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward to, you know, chatting to you in the group later on.
Yep, I will see you in the group.
Okay, thanks a lot, Earl. Bye for now.
Anytime. Bye-bye.